What do you think from your own personal experience would have been handled differently if you had had a hospital birth instead of a home birth?
I'm sorry. I'm laughing so hard because I would have been induced and it probably would have been a horrific induction because they all were. I probably would have labored for days and days and days. And I would have Alexa here. And I probably would have had lactation failure again, So, I mean, the difference is she would be alive for me.
I would have, as soon as I developed a fever, I would have been on continuous fetal monitoring, checking the fetal heart tones every 30 minutes to an hour and going, oh, they're 180, that's fine, is not, adequate. But I developed a fever in labor, which my midwife said, oh, it's because you were in the hot tub, so get out of the tub. And if I'd been in the hospital, they would have been like, get out of the tub, and they would have started me on antibiotics, IV antibiotics. And I would have been fetal monitoring, and if the baby's heart rate had been going that high and was not coming down with the antibiotics, then they would have had a C-section, or at least they would have given me Pitocin to speed the labor along. But when at the end, when my placenta abrupted, it abrupted because there's a 16-fold increase in placental abruption when there's a chorioamnionitis infection that's not being treated. So I had choreo. It was diagnosed in the autopsy afterwards that was what the fever was. My placenta was infected. My water had been broken for 18 hours. And that infection was stressing her out. And then it increased the chance of an abruption. So at the end, when her heart was almost ready to give out anyways, I abrupted. Then she was born within minutes, but she was just covered in blood, and none of that would have, it never would have happened because I would have either had her sooner because I would have been given Pitocin, or had her sooner by a C-section, or never gotten to that place of critical stress on her because I would have been given antibiotics. So it would have changed dramatically. And there would have been a NICU team there when she came out, instead of a midwife with no equipment sucking her blood out of her mouth with her mouth and spitting it on the floor. There would have been a team of NICU people with epi and, suction and, all of that stuff. So she still probably could have lived. I mean, I don't know, but a lot of things would have been different.
For me, the biggest difference is that I would be able to freely talk about my birth experience without worrying that saying too much would jeopardize a lawsuit that will hopefully work in my favor to save unborn babies who are about to die in the care of midwives. But there's nothing about my labor that would have been handled in a hospital the way that it was with my midwives. Not one part of it. There's nothing that they did there that was standard of care, that was intended to preserve life and limb. That's the main thing. The goal of my birth in a hospital would have been living mother, living baby. The goal of my birth with my midwives was vaginal delivery at all costs. And it cost everything, and I still didn't get the vaginal delivery.
I would have definitely been monitored during my labor because we know she didn't bother showing up or really even checking in. And whenever she was born, somebody would have been there and they would have realized the warning signs. And she would be here. The coroner even told me she would have survived. Her death was completely preventable.
So mine would as well be completely preventable. If I was under OB care, I would have probably been induced because I gained 60 pounds. So they said I probably did have gestational diabetes because I started off at like 140 pounds and I was 204 when I gave birth, which is a lot. She was 9 pounds, 4 ounces and posterior. So I couldn't get her out. So I would have definitely probably had a C-section. And she would definitely be here, but because of the lack of care and the choice to allow things to happen as nature happens, well, that's why she's not here.
I would have not gone overdue. I would have been closely monitored. They would have been doing, now from my experience of what a home birth is like and then what a hospital birth with a doctor, I can actually compare them because I didn't know before. I thought they might have been the same. Maybe monitoring was the same, but I didn't know a hand Doppler is not the same as what they do with the doctors, even a doctor's office. Like it's like way different. The care is different. But I would have been closely monitored. They would have noticed things way ahead of time. But first off, I would have never made it to 42 weeks. I would have been induced sooner. And if they had noticed anything, low fluid, my son in distress, something going on with me, they would have just got him out sooner, whether that meant induction to a vaginal birth or a C-section, whatever. It would have been way ahead of time, figure it out. And also I would have been listened to, because at the end time, when I kept saying, I feel like this baby is going to be in here forever, and I feel like I'm never going to go into labor, my body was laboring, but I wasn't like going into like real full on active labor. And I somehow knew it, even though I didn't know it. And so if I would have told the doctor that, first off, I've been monitored, but they would have looked at me a little bit closer and been like, oh, this is why you're not going into labor, because of this or this. This is what we're going to do to get you there, you know? And it would have either been, which I've learned from the guy that did my C-section, the doctor, he was like, these would have been your choices of induction. Like, you know, and if I didn't feel comfortable with the safety for you or the baby, then I would have just done a C-section and you'd have your baby. And guess what? You'd go off. You want to breastfeed, you want to whatever, you could do that too. Not a big deal. So I learned a lot about that, because there was also the fear of, if you do go to the hospital, you're going to get a C-section. Like that is it. The doctors just want to do C-sections on you, especially you home birthers. They want to do C-section. And also you're not going to breastfeed your kid. That was another scare that they tried to put on you. So all that was a whole lie. And that would have made, everything would have been completely different. And I know that not just from the doctor that did my emergency C-section, but from every OB that I've ever talked to, every pediatrician that I've ever talked to about this, that knows, every nurse midwife that I've ever talked to, every NICU person that I've talked to, literally all the medical people that I've talked to, all have said the same thing. All the ways that have failed you would have never happened if you had a doctor, period. Like it just would have not happened.
And if any of these stories had happened with a doctor, that doctor would have lost their license and been sued out of business. And it would have been end of story for said doctor, because it would have been gross malpractice.